What I said and why life kills death, how I invented urban farming, and what comes next. A documentary narration, Section 1. What I said and why I want to tell you how this started. Not the version where I sat down with a whiteboard and a business plan and invented something. The real version. It started with fear. 1995. I was in a room with people who were not my friends. I needed the room to change. I needed to become something that could not be touched, something larger, something that required a kind of awe rather than whatever the alternative was going to be. And in that moment, the breath before I spoke, I saw it. Not a piece of it. The whole thing. Fish in a tank. Their waste rising through the water, nitrogen compounds accumulating, ammonia building toward a concentration that would eventually kill them. Roots hanging down from above, drinking that chemistry, converting it into growth. The water returning to the fish, stripped clean. A loop. Not a machine, a living loop. And above the fish, stacked vertically, towers of food growing in the air, inside a building, inside a city. Not in a field, nobody in a food desert could reach. Inside the city, fed by the fish, feeding the neighborhood. Institutions as the anchor customers, a university, a hospital, a school district. The entities that don't move, that have recurring purchasing contracts, that have a structural interest in the health of the communities they serve. The whole system, in one breath, 30 years ago. And I said it out loud. I said, I am an urban farmer. I said it to survive the room. That's the truth of it. I want to say it plainly here, at the beginning, because the rest of this video is going to involve evidence and documentation that could easily make this sound like a carefully constructed claim. It wasn't carefully constructed. It was called out of me by a situation that required something, and I rose to it. Both things are true. I was afraid, and then I produced something real. The fear was the ignition. Everything I had been carrying in the background for years was the fuel. I didn't do anything with it immediately. Life intervened. That is the honest version. But the framework kept developing in the background. I kept nudging it. By 2004, I had completed a master's degree in international commerce and policy at Valparaiso University, and the academic apparatus gave me the language for what I'd been carrying. Special economic zones, community capital formation, institutional partnerships as economic infrastructure. The frameworks converged with what I had already built intuitively. In 2005, I sat down and wrote the PowerPoint. Not to file a patent, not to launch a company, to document what I had been carrying for 10 years in a form that could be shown to the institutions I had identified as the blueprint it was. That document exists. The file metadata is real. The origin is not the document. The document is the first time the origin was written down. The origin is 1995. A room, a breath. Whatever happens when years of background thinking meets a moment that will not wait. The framework. 7 layers and what they prove. Section 2. The framework. 7 layers and what they prove. The 2005 PowerPoint is 19 slides. The file metadata places it in Microsoft's PPT-10 format, the PowerPoint 2002 XP standard, which predates the PTEX format Microsoft introduced in 2007. The author field reads, Kejung, my document. It describes 7 layers. Layer 1, the biological loop. Fish, tilapia, yellow perch. In aquaponic tanks, waste produces ammonia. Nitrifying bacteria convert ammonia to nitrates. Plants absorb the nitrates, strip the water clean, return it to the fish. Zero external fertilizer. No chemical runoff. The waste of one organism is the nutrition of another. I did not invent aquaponics. The technique predates me by centuries. What I designed was a specific implementation at commercial scale, inside repurposed industrial buildings, integrated with 6 other layers of a city-scale system. That integration is what did not previously exist. Layer 2, spatial architecture. The document specifies 40-foot shipping containers producing approximately 5,000 pounds of leafy greens annually, derived from first principles volumetric analysis. In 2010, freight farms launched the first commercial containerized vertical farm. Their standardized metric, 5,000 pounds per 40-foot container. The same number. 5 years later. I am not saying anyone stole it. I'm saying the math was right, and the document with my name and a 2005 creation date says I got there first. Layer 3, community integration. Morning produce delivery at 7:30 to a community center. Local residents as customers and shareholders. Training programs. The farm as neighborhood infrastructure, not a boutique food experience. Slide 13 maps specific Milwaukee neighborhoods: Emerson East, Amani, Hillside, Near West Side, Bayview, by their food desert geography and post-industrial vacancy. In 2017, those same neighborhoods became federally designated opportunity zones under the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. 12 years after I mapped them. Layer 4, community ownership. Slide 5 specifies a local stock market, Class A and Class B shares. Prices that move on pod performance, community investment in trust. In 2005, this was not legal. The Jobs Act was signed in 2012. Regulation crowdfunding became effective in 2015. I designed a community equity model, a decade before the law caught up with it. I was not breaking anything. I was designing for a future the regulation would eventually have to create. And it did. Layer 5, institutional partnerships. 3 institutions named in the document: University of Wisconsin, Milwaukee School of Freshwater Sciences, Marquette University, Milwaukee Area Technical College. Growing Power eventually developed partnerships with institutions in exactly this set: Research University, Technical College, Health System Anchor. 5 to 7 years after I specified them. Layer 6, Wisconsin manufacturing. Slide 14 lists actual companies with phone numbers: Pentair, Regal Beloit, Johnson Controls, Cargill. Each matched precisely to a technical function in the system, not name-dropping. Industrial ecosystem design. A local supply chain in which Wisconsin manufacturers become the national suppliers for a scaled urban farming network. This level of specificity rules out casual brainstorming. Layer 7, circular economy. End-of-day bakery bread becomes fish food. Restaurant compost cycles back into the aquaponic system. Every output is an input. Nothing exits as waste. McDonough and Braungart published Cradle to Cradle in 2002. The Ellen MacArthur Foundation published its Circular Economy Framework in 2013. My 2005 implementation is independent of both, not because I was unaware of systems thinking, but because this loop is closed by the biology, not by a design philosophy. I followed the biology. The biology was already circular. Now the witness. Slide 14 includes a section called Family Advisors. It lists one name, Nick, my cousin, named in the formal document, a contemporary witness to the development period. I told him, roughly, during this time, it doesn't matter who becomes the public face. Once I explain this framework to the right person, they're going to be the one who gets famous. Because the framework is right. I said it without bitterness. I was being honest about my situation. I didn't have the capital, the platform, the regulatory relationships to be the public face. What I had was the framework, and I knew it was right. Will Allen became the public face of urban farming in Milwaukee. His work was exceptional. His impact on food justice was genuine. The MacArthur Fellowship, Time's 100 Most Influential, earned. The framework he operated within, the aquaponic loop, the institutional partnerships, the geographic targeting, was designed before Growing Power existed as a national organization. The document is dated. The metadata is real. Nick is named. The conversation happened. I am not asking you to reach a legal conclusion. I am asking you to hold the timeline. The principle. Life kills death, Section 3. The principle. Life kills death. What made the 7-layer framework possible was not technology. Aquaponics existed before I designed this system. Container farming was technically possible before freight farms built it. These were not secrets. What made the synthesis possible was a single cognitive principle I have been applying without always knowing I was applying it since before the 1995 night in that room. Slide 19 of the 2005 presentation states it plainly. Just as nature boils things down to elements, all endeavors are elemental. I call it the elemental opposition principle. The phrase I use for what it produces is, life kills death. The formula is 5 steps. Identify the destructive force, the agent, named precisely. Reduce it to its elemental composition, not what it does, what it is made of. Identify the thermodynamic or chemical opposite. Deploy that opposite as a productive input. Close the loop so the productive input feeds back into the system that removed the destructive agent. This is not a metaphor. It is a description of physical processes that work regardless of whether anyone believes in them. Alexander Fleming, 1928. Penicillium mold contaminates bacterial cultures in his lab. The standard response is to discard the sample. Fleming notices the bacteria are dying in a ring around the mold. The organism destroying his experiment produces the compound that saves hundreds of millions of lives. The contamination kills the infection. The invader saves the patient. Life kills death. Maggot therapy. Blowfly larvae consume necrotic tissue with extraordinary selectivity, leaving living tissue untouched. The organism of decay kills what is already dead, so what is still alive can heal. Life kills death. Bioremediation. Deepwater Horizon, 2010. Indigenous hydrocarbon metabolizing bacteria already living in Gulf waters multiplied in the presence of the oil they consumed as fuel. The oil fed the bacteria that ate the oil. The destruction contained its own remedy. Life kills death. I arrived at the phrase the way I arrive at most things, not by designing it, but by hearing myself say something true. I was walking someone through the aquaponic loop. Fish waste to ammonia, bacteria converting ammonia to nitrates, plants absorbing the nitrates, clean water returning to fish. And I heard myself say, The thing that kills the fish feeds the plant that saves the fish. Life kills death. I sat with that for a while because it described not just the aquaponic loop, but every other version of the same process I had been applying for years. The invasive species, the building materials, the fuel system. Where does it fail? I want to be honest. It fails at radioactive decay timescales. The opposition exists. High-energy isotopes do decay to stable ones, but on timescales of thousands to tens of thousands of years. That is not actionable. I do not have an answer to nuclear waste. The EOP fails there, and I say so. It also fails when extraction cost exceeds output value. The framework tells you what the output should be. The economics determine whether it is worth pursuing. Those are separate questions. Within those limits, the principle is consistent, reproducible, and generates solutions across every domain I have applied it to. That consistency, not any single innovation, but the pattern across all of them, is the evidence. The invasive army. 9 species, 9 inversions, 1 system, Section 4. The invasive army. 5 species, 1 system. Let me show you the principle applied not to 1 species, but to 5. Because the power of a framework is not what it does in a single case. It is what it does systematically, across every case you apply it to. Asian carp first. The Great Lakes Fishery Commission has spent hundreds of millions on barriers and netting trying to keep them out of the lakes. 50 years of effort. The fish are still coming. My question was not, how do we stop them? It was, what are they? Elementally, they are protein machines. 18 to 20% protein by body weight. High omega-3. Lean white flesh. Filter feeders. The mechanism that makes them ecologically destructive is a biological water processing function, and they reproduce at explosive rates, which makes the population that is a management nightmare also an inexhaustible commercial harvest resource. The protocol uses chitosan-coated magnetic nanoparticles delivered through pheromone corridors. The carp's own chemoreception aggregates them around the bait. A magnetic sweep array collects the sedated fish. After 48 to 72 hours of depuration in clean water, processing splits into 3 streams. Premium whole fish to food markets. Asian carp is standard commercial fish in China and Vietnam. The market exists. Fish meal to aquaculture feed, fish bone to calcium phosphate as a soil amendment. The invasive fish destroying the Great Lakes food base becomes the raw material for the native species food production system in the urban farm pod. The ecological destroyer feeds the ecological restoration. Now here is the part I find most elegant. The chitosan on the nanocarrier has to come from somewhere. Standard source is shellfish chitin. But there is a better source, one that closes a second loop simultaneously. The emerald ash borer has killed 100 to 130 million ash trees across North America. Its exoskeleton is chitin. The same structural polymer chitosan is derived from. The beetle destroying the ash forests provides the raw material for the nanocarrier that removes the carp. One invasive species produces the tool that removes another. As EAB populations are harvested, the chitosan supply becomes more reliable. Carp removal becomes more efficient. Fish meal output increases. Pod operating costs fall. Each operation funds the next. The system is self-reinforcing. Wild boar, $2.5 billion in US crop destruction per year. What is a wild boar? Elementally, a warm-blooded, high-protein mammal, grass-fed and free-range by circumstance. Premium feral pork, hyperallergenic pet food protein, industrial lard for biolubricants. The animal destroying the crops is itself a crop. Kudzu covers 8 to 10 million acres of the American South, smothering trees at up to a foot per day. Elementally, it is cellulosic fiber growing at extraordinary speed, fixing atmospheric nitrogen, producing biomass at a rate no crop can match. Autonomous solar drones continuously shear the vine crowns. The root regrows, which means in a harvest framework, the perpetual regrowth is a perpetual supply. Cellulosic bioplastics, biodegradable farm packaging, livestock feed at 15 to 18% crude protein. Spotted lanternfly and tree of heaven, managed separately by every current program because management asks how to stop each. The opposition treats them as one system. Tree of heaven is the lanternfly's preferred host. Plant it strategically as a trap crop. Harvest both simultaneously. Lanternfly chitin feeds the same chitosan pipeline as the EAB. Tree of heaven wood contains ilanthone, a natural organic herbicide extracted for podweed management. 2 invasive species removed in a single operation, each producing a commercial output. 5 species, same 5-step formula, each producing commercial outputs that feed into the urban farm pod system. Each removal operation making the next one cheaper. This is not coincidence. This is a principle. And the most significant property of the full system is emergent. The ecological restoration is financed by the ecological damage it is reversing. Life kills death at every scale, across every species, through the same mechanism every time. The record. What publication does and what comes next. Section 5. The record. What publication does and what comes next. Let me be precise about what the evidence proves and honest about what it doesn't. The 2005 PowerPoint exists. The metadata is real. The content predates the commercial industry. The 5,000-pound container yield number converged with freight farms 5 years later. The community equity model predated the Jobs Act by 10 years. The institutional partners were right. The neighborhoods became opportunity zones 12 years after I mapped them. The manufacturers are named with phone numbers. The witness is documented. What I cannot prove, that anyone who built the commercial urban farming industry saw my documents. I cannot establish a specific mechanism of appropriation. I did not invent aquaponics. I did not invent vertical farming. What I did, and what the documentation supports, is synthesize these into a specific integrated framework at engineering specification level with specific institutional, geographic, and financial design before the industry existed. That synthesis is the contribution. What publication does. Before this book, the record exists in private files and the memories of witnesses. After it, the record is public, indexed, cited, archived. Future historians of urban agriculture and circular ecology will encounter it. The origination claims become public historical claims, subject to the same evidentiary standards as any historical claim, and just as difficult to revise without contradicting documented evidence. Publication creates permanence. Historical erasure becomes impossible. That is the purpose. That is enough. What I want, attribution. The history of these fields should include this record, not because I need my name in a textbook, but because incomplete histories make bad policy. Compensation, where specific innovations have been commercially exploited without license. And the Cognitive Property Rights Act, a legislative proposal whose core is this: a documented cognitive process demonstrated to be reproducible and generative of valuable innovations should have legal recognition. A party who exploits innovations within its documented scope should bear the burden of proving independent development. The shift from prove they stole it to prove they didn't. Now, the close. The title of this work is not a metaphor. It is a description of a physical and biological truth I have spent 30 years documenting, beginning in a room in Milwaukee in 1995 when I was afraid and needed to produce something true, and did. In the aquaponic loop, the waste that kills the fish feeds the plants that save the fish. Life kills death. In the invasive army, the carp destroying the Great Lakes food web becomes the fish meal, feeding the pod, feeding the neighborhood. Life kills death. In the building materials, the muscle costing billions to remove becomes the agricultural lime and bioconcrete. Life kills death. At every scale, in every domain. For every problem that can be reduced to its elemental level and met with its elemental opposite. The principle is in the world. I did not design it. I recognized it. And then, over 30 years, in whatever way was available to me at each stage. A room in 1995, a graduate seminar in 2004, a PowerPoint in 2005. Research that continued from there, I nudged it forward, piece by piece, stage by stage. I was afraid at the beginning. I am confident now. The confidence is not bravado. It is what the evidence produces when you have been looking at it honestly for a long time. The record exists. What comes next is up to you. End. Life Kills Death. How I Invented Urban Farming and What Comes Next. Richard C.J. Young, Cage Young.